someone has one from one of New Jersey. As I try to explain to your daughter, all the electronic devices are basically, we're not allowed to have those in New Jersey. So we asked our Dallas garage to try to collect it. Does anyone have an Apple Watch? Yes or no? In their possession? I asked the question. Does anyone have one? No. I see everybody raising their hand for so raising their hands showing no. There's no Apple Watch. Thank you. The second thing I want to do is, based on, I received this pure inquiry form that is signed by the foreperson that reads as follows. State of Florida versus Juvenile Amendments, case number 19-00-1872 CF10A. Chapter 5 asked the following question. What if we can't come to a decision? Everyone is stuck on which side they've chosen, signed by the foreperson. All right? So what I'd like to tell you, or read to you, is an instruction that's called Jury Deadlock 4.1. It reads as follows. I know that all of you have worked hard to try to find a verdict in this case. It apparently has been impossible for you so far. Sometimes an early vote before discussion can make it hard to reach an agreement about the case later. The vote, not the discussion, might make it hard to see all sides of the case. We are all aware that it's legally permissible for the jury to disagree. There are two things a jury can lawfully do: agree on a verdict or disagree on the facts of the case. There are two things that a jury can lawfully do: agree on a verdict or disagree on what the facts of the case may truly be. There is nothing to disagree about on the law. The law is, as I told you. If you have any disagreements about the law, I should clear them up for you now. That should be my problem, not yours. If you disagree over what you believe the evidence showed, then only you can resolve that conflict, if it is to be resolved. I have only one request of you. By law, I cannot demand this of you, but I want you to go back to the jury room, then take in turns, tell each of the other jurors about any weaknesses of your own position. You should not interrupt each other or comment on each other's views until each of you have had a chance to talk. After you have done that, if you simply cannot reach a verdict, then return to the courtroom and I will declare this case mistried and will discharge you with my sincere appreciation for your services. Ladies and gentlemen, you may now retire and continue with your deliberations.
Because those two doctors, one being the chief medical examiner of Broward County, the other one, an associate medical examiner, I think now employed in West Palm Beach, say to you that the first shots of Williams and Thomas were fatal, deadly. Why is that important? Because according to Sergeant Williams, Thomas's injury to his hand came first. There was a defensive wound. We know that couldn't happen based upon the medical testimony. So you will either have to disregard the medical examiner and accept what Williams' testimony is, or I suggest, now that you have four experts, contradicting Williams' testimony, and that is Bellow, Special Agent FBI Agent Collins, and two medical examiners, conflict with Williams' testimony, that you should take Williams' testimony and ignore it, toss it out. You can't have it both ways. It just doesn't work. And then we get to really the two star witnesses. Sergeant Williams. I think I talked a bit about him. And I think the most amazing part of his testimony is that he does not get involved in this case until 3 years after the incident. Again, at the request of the state. Again, because they realize that they have problems. And I applaud them to recognize they have problems. And miraculously, as I told you earlier, even though the Jeep was searched for hours and hours, processed for hours and hours, he finds additional evidence. 2 projectiles that everyone else missed, and a blood stain that is important. And that when he did his analysis, 2 important things occurred. He didn't go in there blindly to do any analysis. He told you that the prosecutors in this case told them that the defendant in this case was this young man. And we need you to do a trajectory analysis to put him on the scene. Now, I suggest to you, you could have a Jolly Green Giant and a midget. And if you give them the dimensions, the height and his arm length, with this mathematical formula, you could say the Jolly Green Giant or the midget was a shooter in this case. They would either be closer to the car or further from the car, depending upon their size. If you want to do an analysis, if you want to do an investigation, if you want to figure out who the shooter is, why do you point to this kid and tell him, this is what we want? Why do you do that? This is the great investigation. This is what they want you to do in order to render a verdict that could take him. And tell him that he's going to live life in the state penitentiary without parole or be on death row. This is the investigation they want you to rely upon and say it's proof beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt? I guess so, according to.
You up for playing outside the lines?
That. And they call Danny Benitez. Who the heck is he? He was on the stand for all of about 2 minutes. Danny Benitez gave Detective Moretti the surveillance tape from the Montessori school. You watched it. It showed, I suggest, nothing probative to implicate this young man in it. But we learned, not from him, but from Loretta, that he doesn't go to the drugstore on Miramar Parkway to check their surveillance tape. He doesn't go to Applebee's to check their surveillance tape. He doesn't go to Polo Tropical or the gas station or the bank on Miramar Parkway to check their surveillance tapes. When the car's on 184th Avenue, he doesn't go to the fire station to check their tapes, surveillance tapes. He doesn't go back to the two elementary schools, Sunset Lakes and West Broward Elementary, to check their surveillance tape, because he knows it all. He knows it. How do you know if you don't check it? How do you know something unless you investigate? We don't have to do anything else. We don't have to do anything except show up. And begrudgingly, we did. Where the Montessori school was, on Pines, there was a Tractor Supply Company and another school. Why don't you get that? And come in here and say, you know what, folks? We checked all of this. Instead, what they do is take a helicopter ride 4 or 5 years later. And we have to sit here and watch as they fly the route. And we have to watch how they drive the route. Not checking what the traffic conditions were that day, back 4 or 5 years ago. Not checking what the weather was 5 years ago, in October 26th. What's the purpose of that? Just add more of what I suggest is a smoke screen. You look at all this and say, heck, 100 exhibits, 500 photographs out of a cell phone, all these text messages. What does it mean? Hopefully, for the state, you'll say, hey, where there's smoke, there must be fire. And say, hey, too bad, young man, too bad. There's a lot of stuff sitting here. And hopefully you will not fall into that trap. And then we get to the lead detective. Well, before we get to the lead detective, I think I missed something. Trevion Glass, the individual who got into the red Mitsubishi, the man who is convicted of 2 felonies. Now, why is that important? Because the judge read you an instruction on some of the factors to look at in determining whether or not to believe a witness or not. And he told you that one of the factors to look at is whether or not the witness has been convicted of a crime. Trevion Glass, the state posed as their star witness, basically, to say, no, he never got into that red Mitsubishi. And he told you one interesting thing. He said he's got the case pending right now, and he doesn't want to go back to jail. Now, who has the authority to put him in jail? We don't. There's only one person who can put him back in jail. And that's the state of Florida, whether it be through the state attorney's office or the police department. We could have looked for blood, traces of blood, because we saw that you sprayed this agent on things and miraculously blood surfaces. You know that.
Yes, sir.
Did you do that?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned to the state that you spoke to an Adrian Davis and a Dontavius Williams, correct?
Yes, sir.
They were the two of the individuals that originally left the studio
Yes, sir.
and got into the red Mitsubishi.
Correct.
You learn from that. I didn't even ask the question.
Any questions, sir?
Reverse entering.
Okay, Joe, thank you. Please be seated. Let the record will show the elected president, damages counsel, the chief state attorney, the judge of the jury, all the executive authority remains on the stand. Counsel, if you're ready to proceed, if you're cross, you may.
Thank you. I think we were on October 27th. I want to go back to October 27th.
Yes, sir.
Leave the hospital. You go to various areas to look for a drive-by. And you learn what Courtney is like. Okay?
Yes, sir.
You do not get a search warrant for the Jeep.
Yes, sir.
And in fact, the Jeep is searched on October 26th. Correct?
Yes, sir.
And the purpose of that was to photograph it, correct?
Yes, sir.
Process it for fingerprints and DNA,
Correct.
and to collect all the physical evidence within inside the Jeep that could lead to who did this. Correct?
Correct.
And that was done over several hours.